Good afternoon, everyone in the Eastern Time Zone. Good evening. This is 10 years hence from the campus of the University of Notre Dame. I'm Professor Jim O'Rourke from the Mendoza College of Business. This is the last in this year's series of 8 speakers on life beyond Earth. So if you're tuned in, welcome. It's good to have you. Thanks for your patience with us. This series has experienced a few reschedulings and a few bumps along the way, but we're grateful that you've stayed with us. Today we have the opportunity to examine private space travel, the relationship between NASA and the government and private sector space manufacturers and service providers. We'll also think a little bit about perhaps space tourism and other issues related to how these people make money. Our guest for today is Eric Thomas, a mission manager for New Shepard Blue Origin, which is a privately funded aerospace manufacturer and suborbital spaceflight services company headquartered in Kent, Washington. Eric is a former submarine officer and a Notre Dame MBA. He studied nuclear physics and was commissioned in the United States Navy at Miami University. The majority of his naval career was spent leading sailors aboard ballistic missile submarines in the Pacific, where he served as a reactor officer and then operations manager for a nuclear submarine. Eric pivoted to a somewhat unconventional role to conclude his naval career. He joined Naval Space Cadre as a technical program manager for an intelligence community satellite constellation. Mr. Thomas decided to pursue his MBA at the University of Notre Dame and graduated in 2021, concentrating in strategy and entrepreneurship. He spent his MBA entrepreneurship position with SpaceX working on Starlink. Meant to say internship there. Apologies for that. He's currently working as a mission manager for New Shepard Blue Origin's premier reusable launch vehicle and has had the pleasure of launching both Jeff Bezos and William Shatner into space. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please help me welcome Blue Origin's Eric Thomas. Eric, good to see you.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Jim.
Yeah, so you're not in some suborbital trajectory at the moment. I trust you're at home.
I am. We are based up in Kent, Washington. All of our launches take place down in West Texas, though, but I spend most of my time up here.
Okay, so one of the reasons we scheduled from last week to this evening involves a young lady named Rose Thomas. Tell us about her.
Yes, absolutely. And I wish so much that I could have been there in person with you all. But we had a launch slip date a little bit for our first child, and she arrived safely on Friday, the 22nd. So right when we would have been having this lecture on Friday, and her and Rebecca, who's also a Notre Dame grad, are both doing great.
Oh, that's wonderful. Glad to hear it. Welcome to fatherhood. I will encourage you when we sign off to go get something to eat and then take a nap. Sleep is a precious commodity for new fathers. Eric, I understand you have some video to show us. And when we run through the slides and video, then we'll come back and I'll turn it over to you so that you can talk about your job and about paving a pathway for a new future in space.
Okay, yeah, all that sounds great. So let me share my screen. All right, can I get a quick audio-visual check?
So go ahead and roll.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. So thanks again, Jim, for that introduction. My name's Eric, and I want to discuss paving the way for the space revolution. So I'll break that down into what what I really mean by that statement. But first things first. So here's Rose. If I seem a little scattered at all, it's because I haven't slept in a few days. Rose is now, let's see what time it is. 5 days and an hour old. So here we are reviewing rocket science for babies. So can't start too early. There's a future domer, future astronaut, Rose. So agenda, I'll just do a quick about me. Jim covered most of that. And then, yeah, we'll discuss what I mean by paving the way, take a look at a couple of disruptors in the space industry, and then discuss what I mean by the space revolution. So what is this thing that I'm claiming that we're on the cusp of, and then give a brief application for us as business students. So, yep, like Jim said, I'm a former submarine officer, so I did 7.5 years, mostly in the Pacific. This photo here in the bottom left is of a test ballistic missile launch, and I had the opportunity to launch 6 effectively spacecraft from underwater while in the service, and learning just what goes into making that happen is really what got me interested in aerospace in the first place. With the caveat of a real interest in exchanging out the payloads for human spaceflight. So I graduated from Notre Dame in 2021, along with my wife, Rebecca, who most of you probably know. So there's a photo of us at graduation. I did my internship with SpaceX, working on the business side of Starlink to work on their plan for an international rollout of ground stations and which markets to try to access one. So that's currently being executed right now. And that's actually based in Redmond. Their operation for Starlink is maybe 200 or 300 people. It's distinct from SpaceX's Hawthorne operations. Yep. And then I went to Blue Origin last year, where I'm working as a senior mission manager for New Shepard. So what is a mission manager? This might actually be easiest to explain from this slide. A mission manager, once a sale has been made to a customer from an aerospace contractor, and we'll think just broad aerospace right now, not New Shepard specific. Mission manager takes that contract and is responsible for the execution of the contract, in short. So from the cradle, from design to destination. So what you see in front of you right here in the center, this is a stack of 60 Starlink satellites that are being loaded into fairing for Falcon 9. Mission manager would make sure that the interface between the rocket and the payload is correct and per design, and that the customer's requirements are being met, as well as all the different environmental factors like shock and vibration and acoustics are all acceptable for the payload, as well as helping to make sure that all the mission requirements with the FAA and FCC are all figured out. So that's what I do. I just get to do it for primarily people. However, New Shepard does also launch research and pure payload flights. So since I've been a part of Blue, we've had 4 pure human flights and 1 just dedicated payload flight. So I thought that would be cool to just briefly run through what New Shepard's flight profile looks like. It's always I never turn down an opportunity to show her off. So I have a couple videos that'll hopefully work, and this will be pretty quick. So like I said, our launch site is based in West Texas. We're maybe 2 hours east of El Paso, and we're sitting at about 3,500 feet above sea level there in West Texas. Part of what's cool about New Shepard and the service that we provide to our customers is it's more than just this flight that we put on for them. It's actually it's a multi-day experience that we give to the crew that ranges from learning not just about this vehicle, but about the history of spaceflight and what it takes to be an astronaut. And it's a multi-day experience, and by the end, we really brought that team together into a crew, which you can really see from both their reviews on the ground, but as well as them in space, which is pretty awesome. So first we'll just take a start at the beginning. So New Shepard is a hydrogen oxygen rocket powered by our BE3 engine that we build in the house. So let's watch that. So that takes up, and I believe all these videos are from NS-18, which would have been the launch that had William Shatner aboard it, as well as my boss, which was also an interesting experience. So the rocket takes off, and the flight. So New Shepard is a sounding rocket, so it essentially goes straight up and straight back down. But one of the first big milestones that rocket attains is what's called max Q, which is the point the point of maximum dynamic pressure on a rocket, which is a function of your altitude and your speed. So the density of the air and your speed. It's just when the rocket's under the most force from the air. Then the main engine will turn off and the capsule will separate from the vehicle. If this is the point where you feel weightless, you don't just feel weightless when you're in space. Anytime that you're on this parabolic trajectory, after you're no longer accelerating with the engine or decelerating with the atmosphere, you're feeling weightless. And you feel about just under 4 minutes of weightlessness with New Shepard. We pass the Kármán line, which is the international recognized boundary of space. It's 100 kilometers up. There is not a clear boundary of space. The air essentially gets thinner and thinner and thinner until it's practically a vacuum. But that also fluctuates depending on what the solar winds are doing, what time of day it is. Just kind of like the ocean, the level of the atmosphere can change and move and have waves, etc. And so I think we have a video of them. Wait.
Oh, Jesus.
Kármán line.
No description can equal this weightlessness.
This is nuts!
Oh, my God.
And that pretty much continues throughout the whole 4 minutes of their flight. We do put about 6 degrees second roll on the vehicle, so that throughout your entire flight you're able to get a full view of the Earth while weightless. And then my favorite part, and I think most people's favorite part, is the booster landing. So at this point, both the capsule and booster are in free fall, and the booster will reignite, deploy landing gear, and land. And a cool fact about New Shepard is that it's actually the first rocket to ever successfully land and be reused to do this reentry profile, deploy legs and land. There's definitely a business case here that we'll talk about a little bit. That there's a big difference between being the first person to do something and being the first person to do it 100 times. Right, but just an interesting fact about New Shepard that he pioneered that. And the last bit of the journey for our astronauts is the descent in the crew capsule. Another interesting fact. So let's see. we feel about 3 Gs of forces on the way up on New Shepard, and about 5 Gs of force upon re-entering. Part of the reason for that is, and let me caveat that with a comparison. So Dragon, SpaceX's a capsule that's re-entering from low Earth orbit, also feels about 5 Gs when it comes in, but it's going much faster and from much higher. So why is that? And it's a function of the angle of re-entry. We've all seen the movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, and this was part of their concern with their final deorbit burn that they did, that they wanted to make sure they weren't coming in too steep because they burn up in the atmosphere. And this is actually the limiting factor, or one of the limiting factors for the altitude that New Shepard's able to fly, is the re-entry of the capsule, because they're coming effectively straight down and not at an angle, which is why the Gs are the same, or on about the same as Dragon. You'll feel about 5 Gs on a re-entry, and then the parachutes will deploy and the capsule will land. And we save all of our reaction control gas and deploy it just at the last second. So you get this big poof of dust. That's an air cushion that we're sending out of the bottom of the capsule. That's not actually impact causing that dust to come up. It's an air cushion being shot out. And it's been described to me by the largest astronaut that we've flown so far, Michael Strahan, as if you were to just sit down on your sofa kind of hard is what the landing feels like. And yep, and then normally we have Jeff comes out and greets the astronauts. I think if we fast forward, you can see I'm one of these blue shirted vest wearing guys out here, but this is such an awesome photo of seeing the booster in the background with the capsule. So anyway, so thanks for indulging me showing off New Shepard there a little bit. We're really proud of this vehicle. Oh, go ahead, Jim. Did you have a?
No, I have a whole series of questions for you, but you have some more slides for us, don't you?
Yeah. So if you have a question about New Shepard specifically, we could ask those right now.
Sure. Well, let's go back to, if you can unshare your slides, we'll go back to our regular screen, and then we'll return to your slides. My questions really begin. Let me talk propulsion first. You said hydrogen, oxygen. So let me ask a kind of wonky question. Is this a hypergolic fuel system, or is there like a turn on, shut off valve in that engine?
So great question. And this is part of what's awesome technology that we're really proud of. So the new Shepard vehicle is not a hypergolic fuel. A benefit of hypergolic fuels are their stability over long periods of time, that they're able to sit there, typically not cryogenic, so you don't have to have them really cold in order to store them. So you can make that rocket and sit, and that's why they're very popular with ballistic missiles or other missile technology, that you just need something to sit in a bank somewhere. The New Shepard is a hydrogen and oxygen rocket, so the byproduct of combustion is water. So it's a very environmentally friendly rocket in that sense. And part of what's really cool about the BE-3, something that's hard to do with rocket engines, is to figure out it's one thing to turn them on, it's another thing to turn them off and then reignite them in flight, which is...
have you ever tried an air start?
Right. So the BE-3 engine reignites, it shuts off right before the capsule separates, and then on the way down, we reignite in order to slow the rocket down. And part of what's difficult to do with rocket engines is have a deep variance in the ability to throttle the engine. So the way SpaceX does this is the Falcon 9 has 9 engines on the bottom. When they re-enter and do that burn at the very end, they don't have all 9 engines on. I believe they have 3 engines on. If we were in person, I'd ask someone to give me a real-time lookup for that. But we only have the 1 engine, so the engine has to be very deeply throttleable in order to stop and hover, and then set the rocket down gently.
Well, that's about as cool as anything I've seen. You know, I've been around a while. And when I was a kid, a fairly young kid, Buck Rogers, who was a fellow who fell asleep in a mine shaft and woke up in the 25th century. And he walked out wearing a World War I uniform, and he became an astronaut, curiously. But the rocket ships that he flew, he would climb up in and, light the engine, they'd take off, and then he would land it straight down again. My mother asked me how that worked, and I said, Mom, this is fictional. So I said, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work. And I was also pretty sure it would never work, because how many things are there that can go wrong? I'm sure there are hundreds, but apparently your software has figured those out. Am I right?
Yeah, and it's an absolutely huge part of it. And a theme that you'll see even in the rest of some of what I share is a lot of these ideas aren't new, and the dreams have been there, and the ideas have been there. And right, Jules Verne has been writing about this, some of these ideas way back when, and Arthur C. Clarke's written about these ideas way back when, and everyone expected a lot of this stuff to be figured out by now. But really
Jules Verne had people sitting in lounge chairs, smoking a pipe on the way up. So some of that has changed. How far apart are you from the launch site and the recovery site for the launch vehicle? Are they near each other? It looked like they were near each other, but
yeah, great question. And in the flight profile I showed, it's deceivingly wide, right? The profile is practically is straight up and straight back down. Because while we stand, let's see, from Mission Control to the launch complex is about 2 miles, and the landing complex, which is just a pad, is an additional 2 miles away from that.
Does the rotation of the Earth affect that?
Yes, it does. But we account for that in the flight profile.
Okay. All right.
But it goes up high enough that yes, and it's just long enough to consider it.
All right. Cape Canaveral first, I think, and then reverted to Cape Canaveral, was chosen because it gave the launch team a better slingshot effect from the eastern part of the United States. And I'm wondering if rocketry has now evolved to the point where you could launch anywhere and recover anywhere. What do you think?
That's such a great question. And there's an important philosophical point behind a lot of the locations that we launch from. So why do we launch to the east? Because the Earth is rotating that way. So that's free speed that we can get, because orbit is all about is velocity parallel to the surface of the Earth, right? So launching to the east, that's just free speed that we can put into getting to orbit. So why is Florida a great location? Well, because if something goes wrong with a rocket, there's no one lives underneath that flight profile. It's out over the ocean at that point. So what about other orbits that we might be interested in, like a polar orbit or a sun synchronous orbit, which are highly inclined orbits? So those are going more towards the north. Well, I can't launch from Cape Canaveral then because I'm putting the rocket over people. So there's risk there. So we do most of those launches from Vandenberg Air Force Base out in
Vandenberg I've been out there many times and seen some operational base launches. Those were usually Atlas or Delta rockets, and they just kind of push off the coast and head north, and they're into polar orbit.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of interesting launch fighters like Rocket Lab, for instance, that launches out of New Zealand. For their ability to, if they want to launch often enough, they don't want to have to shut down maritime and air operations. They want to be somewhere that's very out of the way, which the southern tip of New Zealand is. So as far as opening up other locations, yes, I don't think that we'll ever want to lose the safety aspect of not launching over people's houses.
You're not going to launch from downtown Chicago, perhaps.
Yeah. And in West Texas is pretty sparse, which is part of why Jeff picked that location for our launch site one. We are in discussions to maybe build a second site to fly New Shepard out of. But those are all considerations that go into it as the flight profile. And the nice thing about New Shepard is that because it is a vertical profile, we are able to squeeze in.
Well, the nobody lives here argument is sort of how we got the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. It's this giant rectangular box. So I know we launch a lot of things out there, but again, that poses some concerns. Let me ask about this reusable launch vehicle, though. One of the things I'm keenly aware of is a metric that we used to follow very closely in the Air Force called mean time between failure. Every mission critical part in an airplane had to be swapped out, whether it was ready or not, when it hit mean time between failure. So you judge all the failures. Some of those parts go a while, some of them don't go as long, but when you hit mean time, they would swap out mission critical parts such as an inverter, or power system parts. Is that what you're doing with this launch vehicle, or are you using all original parts for the life of the vehicle?
Again, great question. So I'm going to answer your question. I'm going to step back and give a high-level answer first, which is the part of the purpose of New Shepard is to be a test bed for New Glenn, which is Blue Origin's next rocket that they're building, which is an absolutely enormous rocket that will be debuting next year.
Much heavier lift capacity?
Much heavier. That's a 7-meter fairing, which is the largest. It's twice the volume of anything on the market right now. It will be able to take payloads all the way to the moon and beyond. And it's going to be the launch vehicle that Blue uses to launch a lot of interesting projects such as Orbital Reef, which is going to be our mixed business park use space station that's going to be coming online in the later 2020s.
So related to that question, though, is what's the usable lifetime of this thing?
Right. So that's right. The whole point of that is I just wanted to say that New Shepard is a test bed for New Glenn. So it's a very over-engineered rocket. There's a lot of extra stuff on it that might not need to be there for what its flight profile is, because we're trying to find technologies that are scalable, that can scale up into New Glenn. So one, there's a lot of development stuff that goes onto that rocket that is swapped out fairly often because of that. Now, those are ancillary things to the standard just operation of the rocket. Otherwise, part of what we want New Shepard to be, and part of what we're learning to do with New Shepard, is have a vehicle that can be turned around quickly, because part of our goal is we want to always launch reliably, we want to launch often, and we want to be able to launch on schedule, right? Because that makes us a good
Southwest Airlines is doing 20-minute turnarounds.
Right. So, and this is part of what we're kind of making the FAA a little bit crazy in some ways, because we're approaching a cadence now where we're launching every month and a half, and we're going to be pushing up to launching every month here in not too long. And which is, while it's still a lot longer than an airline, it's closer to an airline than a standard rocket company is.
Yeah, well, a month and a half is about the distance from the vertical assembly building out to the launch pad at Cape Canaveral.
Right. Yeah, also true.
Okay, I still did not hear a number. Eric, can you give me one?
I don't know what the number is off the top of my head for, and part of this is that we're figuring out the rocket as we do it. We have a lot of components that are on a 5-flight replacement schedule. So we'll have 5 flights, then we'll do a more significant overhaul period for the vehicle. But all the components aren't just for the life of the vehicle. There are parts that are refurbished. There's some parts that are replaced. The goal is to have as much be able to be refurbished as possible and have as few things be completely swapped out between missions.
Okay.
So an example of something that might get replaced would be the landing legs. They have a crushable section that help absorb the impact when it lands, and those have to be replaced every time.
All right.
But the vast majority of things and components on the rocket are either for the life of the vehicle or are able to be refurbished.
So how many of these things do you have?
So right now we have two. We have one
Okay.
that is human-rated, and we have one that was the not the prototype, but I mean, yes and no. We have
Tail
two
number
called Block
001, right?
We have that tail that is we only use for our payload missions.
Okay.
And then we have one that is human-rated, and we'll have the delivery of our second human-rated vehicle this year, which is going to instantly double our cadence. And then we'll have another tail shortly after that. So this is part of the interesting place that Blue Origin's at, which may be of interest to people in business school looking for places to go. That Blue Origin is in this big transition from a research and development company to a operational company, and it's a classic problem that design is often overrated and production is often underrated. And it's one thing to say, I designed this amazing rocket system, and it's another thing to say, give me 20 of them.
Yeah.
That's where Blue's at right now, is figuring out, okay, like this works. Like now we need to.
So who's building those for you, Eric?
We build them in-house, and here in Kent we have our rocket factory that we make our engines, and we make and that includes engines for New Shepard as well as the BE-4 engine, which is the engine that will power New Glenn, and the engines that are being sold to ULA to power their Vulcan Centaur rocket.
Not everybody who can say he works in a rocket factory. So let me just get a generalized answer. The two phrases in military procurement that are always kind of, never spoken about aloud were sole source and foreign purchase. So do either of those phrases intersect with your business model?
This is part of the beauty of being a private company versus the government, is we're able to bring, and our goal is to bring as much of this in-house as we can. So there still are a lot of commercial off-the-shelf parts that we use right now. We have acquired some manufacturing companies because they were doing something well that we want to be able to do in-house. Honeybee Robotics is an example of that we're buying or just acquired for some of our advanced development programs that we're working on. But otherwise, our goal is to from 3D printing to machining to assemblies to do the vast majority of the rocket construction here.
So this looks like an all domestic project, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, we've seen supply chain disruptions of an unbelievable sort over the last few years. And if if your prime manufacturer for some key part is in Upper Volta or somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great point from a component level. And luckily we're able to do most of that ourselves. We still have to buy, we don't have a foundry, right? So, you have to.
No, that's tough work.
But pretty much everything down the line of receiving the billets in one side of the factory is done in-house. And then the same principles can be said of our New Glenn rocket, which is under construction in our factory in Florida.
Okay. So let's talk for a few minutes about Payload. What is it you're flying?
For New Shepard?
Yeah.
So for payload missions, this is interesting. So obviously, space tourism, we're flying people. That's pretty apparent. But there's actually a surprising market for even for the short duration in 0G and the short duration past the Kármán line, relatively. I mean, compared to say sending.
You mean for passengers?
Where right?
I do have a question about that I asked Eileen Collins. I don't know if you got to see her answer, but I'll go ahead and ask the question anyway. I asked another astronaut who's name I will not reveal, but if you're clever enough, he flew on Apollo 16. I said, General, what do you think about these three entrepreneurs flying their friends around in suborbital trajectories and then calling them astronauts? And his response to me, he didn't hesitate a bit. He said, "You buy yourself a ticket to Albuquerque, does that make you a pilot?" And I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Works the same in space." So I think the point I took from his comment is that the astronaut community is still fairly small, fairly tight, extraordinarily well trained, and I think one of the things I admired about them is that none of them were in it for the money. You were still getting a major or lieutenant colonel's pay, and now people who appear to be space tourists want to be thought of as astronauts. Is there any tension along those lines?
I mean, you hit it on the head, right? There absolutely is that tension exists, and I think the FAA is now said that anyone that flies for tourism, whether that's Inspiration 4 with SpaceX or our passengers on New Shepard, they won't get their official astronaut wings from the FAA. But Blue Origin, we have our own wings, so you can be in our club, and SpaceX has their own wings, so you can be in their club.
Kind of like the wings you would get at Delta if you were a passenger under 6.
And it is interesting philosophically that once access is opened up to space, that we're able to we'll just always have rockets leaving and returning from whatever LEO destination or to the moon, right? You used to have to be super, have so many hours and so much training and so much technical competency in order to do that. But if you are now a person that goes up and does this manufacturing project in space for 2 months and comes back down, are you an astronaut? Like, once access becomes so open, it is kind of an interesting question. You have to be driving it because vehicles are autonomous now anyways. So
well, Eileen Collins said, and I thought it was a good answer. She said, "I think the American people are smart enough to figure this out for themselves. They know who's an astronaut and who's not." And she said, "It really depends on the nature of the work you're doing. So if you're a mission support specialist aboard the ISS, you're not driving the truck, but you're performing mission essential work. You're running experiments. You're doing a variety of things, and they indeed are astronauts." So that term, I think, will remain fluid for a bit, and we'll see which direction that goes. So, tell me about your customers. Who are they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of combine that with the question you asked just before the astronauts, which is what are we flying? So there's actually quite a market that may be not so apparent to most folks for New Shepard's flight profile. So I'll give an example. A significant number of payloads flown to the ISS fail because, and by payloads I mean like my science project I've sent up, my research project, some basic research module that I've sent up to go up on ISS, fail because they haven't been able to be tested in a 0G or micro G environment, or they needed a pure micro G environment, which is actually can be difficult to even obtain on the ISS, because any motion on the ISS, you running on a treadmill on the ISS, causes flexation, causes movement, which disrupts the micro G environment. And it's very expensive to get to the ISS. So there's actually, it turns out, a really good market for, we just want to send up our payload to make sure it works before we invest all the money to send it up to station. And we've flown a lot of those payloads. And it's, like I said, the market is actually really good for those payloads. There's a lot of that we have, and then a variety of interesting payloads. We, on the last couple missions, have flown a NASA payload that's designed to pick landing spots for lunar missions help rovers know where to land, or lunar landers know where to land. So we have a whole fake little moon area built up that's like 500 feet by 500 feet, and the system runs on New Shepard, even though it doesn't go land over there. It makes
Don't
it
tell
efficient.
Colonel Aldrin. He's still mad at that guy who claimed that the moon landing never happened. So I'm fascinated with that, particularly with space tourism. Let me share something the associate dean of our College of Science shared with me. He said there are now half a dozen refereed serious papers that demonstrate that active carcinoma cells, cancer cells, will move into remission in a weightless environment. They've demonstrated this time and again. And there are three phases of a cancer cell. There's the emerging growing cell, and there's the dead cell, and then the dormant phase. But he said, the experiments that have been conducted on the ISS in a weightless environment or in a microgravity environment have led them to believe that this may be valuable, maybe extremely valuable, for therapeutic purposes. And so I said to him, what are we talking about? The space clinics? He said, yes. Yeah. He said, essentially a hotel in space, and we don't know how long it would take for your particular tumor to recede and disappear. But he said that may be without a knife or any other intervention, purely non-invasive. You get a ride to a geosynchronous hotel, spend 2 weeks, and come on home cancer-free. Has anybody thought about the market value of something like that?
One, absolutely, this is something that's being talked about. Two, I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'll need a Notre Dame MBA to help me out with figuring that out. And I'll give you an example. So one of Blue Origin's goals is to be, and we all know the analogy because we get it at school so many times, of Amazon didn't have to invent the infrastructure that was necessary in order to make Amazon what it is today, right? It didn't have to invent the USPS or invent the internet or invent credit cards, right? It had to link those three things together in the value chain, right, to be able to make Amazon what it is today. And Blue Origin's goal is to provide, or one of its goals is to provide that infrastructure, be that infrastructure, so that businesses like Amazon, things that I haven't even thought about, things like what you're describing here, that's akin to space tourism, in that it's a hotel in space. Maybe there's a clinic aspect to some of it, right? So here's a project that Blue Origin's working on called Orbital Reef, which was debuted earlier this year, which is a multi-use business park idea that's essentially a replacement for the ISS, which is, and more than that, which the ISS is scheduled for retirement at the end of 2030, I believe. So not that long from now. And Orbital Reef's goal is Blue Origin is going to provide the backbone structure of Orbital Reef, which is a space station in low Earth orbit. It's going to provide the housekeeping, right? It's going to make sure the trash goes out on time. It's going to make sure you have power and water.
So are you saying Orville Reef as in Orville, right? Orbital. Okay.
Orville, yes.
You have a habit of naming things after aviators. I wondered if the name Orville.
That's true. Yeah. Why did that one stick? I'll ask our VP about that. And this is it's a joint venture with Boeing and Sierra Space, where we'll have kind of a laboratory module that'll be initially built by Boeing, and a dormitory module that's being built by Sierra Space that'll attach to this. And the goal is to have that infrastructure in place with a standardized design, and we will work with companies that come to us with ideas that's like, hey, I want to build this clinic, so I can send people up to low Earth orbit to stay there. well, we have the infrastructure provided in the launch surface. We have the infrastructure provided in the LEO destination is built in there with and it's ready to have the next module attached to it. And we'll work with you to help design it. And that's kind of our dream. But that specific example that you gave of a clinic like that is absolutely something that's being discussed.
So are you flying satellites now, mini satellites, big ones, weather service, television, whatever?
Is Blue Origin specifically flying satellites? Yeah. We are not. We are not flying satellites. And that does kind of get back to our fundamental mission. We want to provide that infrastructure so that other companies can go out and do that work that we've have 100 CubeSats that we need to put up for some weather study, and we know that these guys they're reliable, they're launching on time, and they're launching often. And here I can ride share up so that when you're doing this launch for Orbital Reef, we can also deposit or insert these payloads into whatever plane they need to go into.
Can you be speculative for a moment about the foreign market? To what extent do you think other nations would, let's say, private enterprise come to you as opposed to their own space agency?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I think that we will see nations that have maybe nascent space programs come to us, especially when it comes to a LEO destination like Orbital Reef, to come and figure out what it takes to build and exist in a space station. So I think that is absolutely a place that we'll see foreign governments come to want to participate in, especially if they have a nascent program like that.
Do you see yourself in the classified payload business? Is that going to become part of the revenue stream?
It will. So New Glenn, which has not flown yet, is being onboarded right now, and that I got to look up make sure I get it right. The National Security Space Launch Program, as well as NASA's Launch Services Program. So the one being the NASA's commercial, and then the intelligence community's classified payload is being onboarded into both of those programs right now. And we're working through contracts for some flights with NRO right now for future New Glenn flights. So that'll absolutely be a part of the customer base for New Glenn.
So is Blue Origin then a kind of redundancy in the lift capacity, or is it your aim to become the primary go-to provider for the government?
Great question. I think that we will be an additional provider. Mm-hmm. I don't think that we will be able to completely dominate the space. I think in the super heavy lift place, we will, if SpaceX's Starship comes online, I think it'll be us and them that are in that space. And that right now it's going to be it, but there is kind of a blue ocean there for the super heavy lift.
Kind of an oligopoly with pretty heavy barriers to entry.
The amount of investment that it takes to from just a technological standpoint is huge. To learn how to building rockets is hard, and it's even New Shepard by comparison is small beans, right? Compared to what New Glenn's going to be doing, and run a New Shepard is hard.
Yeah. The competitor who just bought Tesla might have to borrow a lot more money in order to get into this space. So I have a question, and this comes from Clive Neal. You may not know the name, but he is in the Notre Dame College of Engineering, and he is one of the very few recognized experts on lunar mining. He is a lunar geologist and a guy with a lot of vision. So here's his question. He has two, but he's sent this one along first. He asks, when will New Shepard be able to simulate lunar gravity? this could be enabling for mining regolith and moving the products refined from resources on the moon?
Yes, that's a great question. That's a project I'm working on right now. So that's real, I'm excited for that question. So right, moon gravity is about 1/6 Earth gravity.
Right.
And we are able to, like I described with the twist rate of the capsule for New Shepard, when we are running a human payload flight, we want that rotation so that everyone can get a view of the Earth while weightless. But we're able to make that spin rate whatever we want it to be. And on one of our next payload flights, we are potentially planning on, and I don't know if it's the next one or the one behind it, but we're working with exactly that. And it's not, I don't believe it's for mining, but it's for equipment going to the moon to put the spin rate on, and I don't know the spin rate off the top of my head, in order to simulate that 1/6 gravity through the duration of the flight, and then through the weightless portion to be able to run the machines. Because it's again, you can simulate so much, and computers are amazing, but nothing compares to just being able to put something in the environment, and then how does fluid dynamics work on the moon? Like it's way more of a complicated question, and sometimes you can't beat learning by breaking something, by putting it in that environment. So that's absolutely something that New Shepard's.
Well, how soon are you going to get there? When do you plan to fly to the moon?
Me personally.
Or, I don't know. Maybe Rose will make that trip. But when do you think Blue Origin is going to head for the moon? Your company.
So the first flight of New Glenn right now is planned to not just be a demonstration shakedown of recovery of the first stage, but a Pathfinder mission to the moon, and we are going to put a payload on the moon with the first mission of New Glenn. So
is that going to be a kind of commercial payload, or will it be mostly NASA?
It's going to be a NASA payload. We're going to be putting down, so it's called the Lunar Pathfinder mission, which is going to be components for the lunar lander.
Is that a precursor to putting up a lunar base?
It will be. That's the idea is, and I really like this concept of camping versus settling when we start establishing a presence on the moon, is that we want to have lunar permanency, right? So there's a lot of infrastructure that go into lunar permanency. Maybe that means refueling stations in low Earth orbit so that I have an easier jumping off point. Maybe that means having robots that can go to the moon to 3D print fuel storage tanks or structures out of the lunar regolith, which is mostly aluminum and oxygen, right? So to make aluminum structures or synthesize oxidizer from the oxygen. And we always talk, like I always hear about, like there's water on the moon at the poles, but I don't think we've ever touched the water at the poles. I think we scanned, and I hope that there is, because then we can.
Well, Rob Jedicke talked about hydrogen. Rob Jedicke talked a few weeks back about mining the asteroids, and one of the things I hadn't realized, I thought they were looking for rare earths or expensive minerals, but he said, there is so much water in those asteroids, they would expose it to very high temperatures, concentrated by mirrors, and then wrap it essentially in a bag, and you could then, it would have a number of uses. You could, use it through hydrolysis for fuel. You could use it to drink. You create oxygen out of it, but you also can create liquid water, which you could either park in orbit or land on the moon, yes. Or, it wouldn't make any sense to bring it home. We have probably all the water we need.
And that's what's a lot of stuff that's fascinating about asteroid mining. Or actually, let me jump back to the moon real quick. But camping versus settling, which is, we want to have the mentality of not just packing all of our food and our air with us, but being able to go to the moon in such a fashion that we're able to stay. So we want to bring tools to make better tools, and not just bring a tent, but go and build build a structure there that we can actually exist.
Be able to forage.
Mm-hmm. And it'll never be completely independent from the Earth, obviously, but the ability to have manufacturing or a launching off point is huge. And then asteroid mining, like you said, the ability to have fuel, which just further helps the infrastructure of space. But I mean, it seems like every other week there's an announcement that, we found a new near-Earth asteroid that has $1 trillion of platinum series elements in it that, sounds great for, it's like, oh, great, gold, we can bring that back. But
get a butterfly net, right?
From a manufacturing perspective, the ability to take advantage of cold welding in zero-G environments means that we can make some incredible microstructures that are practically impossible to make on Earth, on some really just impressive stuff.
Well, the asteroid belt, of course, as our viewers know, is between Mars and Jupiter. So that's a long ride. It would take us, 6 months to get to Mars?
Yeah, so it takes on the order of months to get to Mars. But when we're talking about asteroid mining, and that's a great point. We're not normally talking about the asteroid belt. There's a significant amount of asteroids out there between Mars and Jupiter. However, there are several what are called near-Earth asteroids that are in orbit around the sun, that are in elliptical orbits, that periodically come really close to the Earth. That would be very short trips to be able to go out and potentially mine. And there's a lot of...
No, I was going to say, I sat in as a faculty member from the English department at the Air Force Academy on a celestial mechanics course. And I got to tell you, that's got to be challenging in order to get your trajectory right, get your speed correct, get the intercept in order to meet up with this rock out there.
It's impressive stuff. And I went to a school while I was working with the Air Force there as operations manager for that satellite constellation that you had mentioned. And they taught us all about orbital dynamics and all this stuff. And it is some complicated stuff. Nothing compared to me learning about orbital dynamics and playing the game Kerbal Space Program, which is, I think there's an XKCD comic that shows that as well. But it's absolutely impressive.
Well, what astonishes me still to this day is that the Apollo program did all of that stuff with paper and pencil. And those were pretty smart women for the most part, a few guys in on that project, but they checked and double-checked their numbers. We would depend entirely now on, high-speed data processing in order to figure out those orbital trajectories and how we meet up with them. So let me ask about some kind of mundane entry-level questions. How does a kid like yourself get into this business? I know you came through the Navy, but where do you recruit? Who are you looking for? What sort of skill sets?
Great question. So this is part of what's really broadly interesting about the space revolution that we're kind of on the cusp of. And I think we're on the cusp of it because of the cost of access to space coming down, as well as a lot of this infrastructure being built out by companies that have the investment to be able to do it. So companies like Blue Origin. And there's a bunch of companies that are doing all kinds of interesting stuff, from orbital management, like Azure Orbital that Microsoft's doing, that or launch services, or the infrastructures in LEO. But one, I'd say from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I mean, there are so many good ideas out there that just need someone with the business know-how to take this thing to market, or to just market the idea. So there's no shortage of
Warren Buffett said your problem isn't money. There's all the money you need out there. What he said is we need better ideas.
Yes.
And, I see, I asked, this was at a kind of a panel discussion, why did the dot-com bubble blow up 20 years ago? And he said, more money than good ideas. And I asked for his proof, and he said, well, pets.com, you're selling rain gear to cats on the internet. Apparently the market's not as big as we think. So he said, what we're looking for in hiring new people, he was talking about Berkshire Hathaway, is people with good ideas, people who can think big and show us, as George Bernard Shaw once said, things that never were, and ask why not.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I'd say that from the entrepreneur and ideas perspective. Two is, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, that so take a company like Blue Origin that, and maybe you can contrast them with SpaceX a little bit here with the whole like design versus production. I think that's one thing to design a really awesome rocket. It's another thing to say, give me 100 of them. And Blue Origin kind of started out as a ideas and research and development company. And let's see, when I got hired, there were less than 3,000 of Blue Origin. Now there's 4,500 of us. So just in the last year, we've grown by almost 50%, which is incredible. But we're in the middle of that transition to being in operational. So Blue needs people that know operations, that know production, that know supply chain, because these are all
they got to be, in many ways, they got to be linked at the hip. A fellow named Eric Jumper, who works in the wind tunnel. He's the director of the wind tunnel at Notre Dame. I first met at the Air Force Academy. And Eric, it kind of a toss away line, once said, every part of an airplane, every part is a result of something that went wrong, something that failed. And he said, we figured out why it failed, and we tried to make it better. And then we tried to make it both fail-proof and pilot-proof. And so the people who design and build these things have really got to be in close contact with the people who operate them.
Yeah, absolutely true. And the just to finish that one thought with production, I'll contrast them with SpaceX. That Elon was able to come in with all of his know-how from Tesla and make a production company that happens to make rockets. Once they got the Falcon 1 figured out.
He has a car in orbit, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. In was it 2017? I think it was the debut of Falcon Heavy. They launched a Tesla Roadster into space. And granted, what they really launched is the shell of a Tesla Roadster. They
not like somebody's going to start the engine up there.
But yeah. It's in heliocentric orbit right now, so it's up there going around. So Blue's growing. I mean, the whole industry is growing. Blue's obviously looking for people that everyone is really hungry for engineers, I think, but they're getting to the point where they now need people that can do the strategy and do the management to make the business.
Let me tell you about a book that was published just this month, and it's Jim Meigs wrote a book called "The End of Astronauts," and he makes the case for purely robotic and what we now call non-crewed or unmanned space vehicles. He said, we can do more out there, cheaper, take no risks. So astronauts will be this fleeting blip during the 20th century, and we're essentially done with them. Do you agree with any of that?
The quote is that we've done it all for space. There's kind of nothing.
Well, the rest of it will be robotic and mechanical, remote control, autonomous flying, and it'll be uncrewed. I
think a lot of it will be. Like, I don't think we are going to send someone to the moon with a pickaxe to do lunar mining.
So you don't see Bruce Willis on an asteroid,
right? Yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. But there's a lot of applied research. there's a lot of manufacturing. There's there's so many applications, particularly in LEO, low Earth orbit, that are always going to have people. I don't think that that's ever going to go away. I think that we're going to see the amount of astronauts increasing in LEO or space tourists or space visitors or whatever we make the distinction versus pilots up there, because even just from an applied research standpoint, if I am manufacturing exotic structures here's a great example of growing organs, right? That 3D printing organs on Earth is impossible. They are always collapsing under their own weight.
Right.
You're able to send up your own stem cells and have your liver grown on the space station. Like stuff like that is going to always be tended and unique enough, and always have one-offs that we'll need to have mission specialists that are running these kinds of things, or technicians running these kinds of manufacturing or experiments.
So, Eric, you're a fairly young guy. Given the average human lifespan, even though it's ticked up just a bit, I no longer have to take my shoes off at the airport, and periodically people are surprised at that. But do you ever see Homo sapiens leaving the solar system?
Oh my gosh! So I guess I want to say two things about that. One, just what an amazing idea, and it's in the human spirit to want to explore, right? And it's easy for me to just be a curmudgeon and say, well, why leave my house? Like, I have everything that I need, right? But it's absolutely in the human spirit to go out and explore, and to not just dominate the Earth, right, but to dominate the solar system or beyond. The step off of Earth to, say, Mars is a huge step. The step from the solar system to the next place, that's an even larger step. The curmudgeon in me, though, which is the second thing, is that I really like Earth, and I think that Earth is best, and frankly, it is more habitable in Antarctica than it is on Mars. It's both warmer, and I can breathe when I go outside. So do I want to go to Mars or beyond the solar system? Personally, I don't. But maybe Rose will feel a lot differently, and she's younger and less of a curmudgeon than I am. Right?
Is there any place like Hawaii in another solar system? And there are places you want to find, but I totally agree about Earth, which is the imperative for us to take care of it, to move to a zero carbon footprint. And I think you told me that the launch vehicle for New Shepard emits water vapor.
Yeah, so that's part of the philosophy of Blue Origin. What we want to do, and when we're talking about this infrastructure lowering the cost of access to space, we want to net. We're doing it because we want it to benefit Earth, and that means, one, benefiting mankind, but two, benefiting our home. So the way that we go about building the launch vehicles, we want to be done in as sustainable of a way as possible. So fuel choice is an example of that, where we don't want to burn a solid rubber fuel, right? We opt to burn hydrogen and oxygen. We opting over burning kerosene or rocket fuel, right? We are going to be using liquid natural gas and oxygen on New Glenn.
Sure.
So that's absolutely part of it.
So I suppose the secret to that is figuring out the hydrolysis equation so that we can crack seawater open and remove the hydrogen without leaving a big carbon footprint.
Yeah, at the end of the day, there is, how do we get that fuel? Because there's non-environmentally friendly ways of getting hydrogen, even if burning it is relatively cleaner, because you're just getting water vapor out of it, and not carbon dioxide or other partial combustion byproducts. But there's clean ways to get hydrogen, and there's dirty ways of getting hydrogen. Sure. Electrolysis being a clean way, and steam reformation being a dirty way. And that comes down to energy. So going further down the chain of where we're getting the energy in order to produce the fuels, right, is the same nut that needs to get cracked.
Well, that says to me as an educator that we need engineers and people to study engineering. We need scientists to provide us with the payloads and the great ideas to fly. And we need business students to help make sure that there is enough money, that it's well managed, and that it's all affordable, and that it benefits mankind. So, Eric, we're down to the last couple of minutes. Any final thoughts for our audience?
Let me see. I think we talked. I had maybe like 30 slides. I mean, we talked about everything, and it's been absolute pleasure. So I'm just going to take a quick look and see if there was anything.
Okay,
That,
I have no notes here. This is all, top of mind.
This has been absolutely great. Uh, 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 yeah, I mean, there's just so much cool stuff that we're on the.
Do you do tours? Do you do visitors at the launch site or at your factories?
Oh yeah, we absolutely do.
So your factory is where?
In the factories in Kent,
Washington,
and then we have our New Glen site in our factory down there in near Cape Canaveral, in Florida, at what we call our Orbital launch site.
Okay, so will you send me an email that I might share with students who have job inquiries or other questions? I'm not sure I want to put that out in the wild, but I would share it carefully with students.
Oh, that's totally fine. And I mean, if I can just share my screen real quick and just kind of leave this up there. You know, anyone on the call is welcome to reach out on LinkedIn if they have questions or things I didn't get to, or questions about what Blue's doing or employment, etc.
etoma23 at alumni.nd.edu. Eric Thomas, you're the kind of fellow who makes people like myself struggling with MBAs each day to get them back on the rails. Extremely proud. We're delighted to have you here. And my hope is that before too long, we'll have you on the stage in Jordan Auditorium and invite you to come talk about the business, and we'll see how it's grown.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And we'll get you out to one of the sites for a tour.
Good. Oh, I would love that. I would love that. And if you've got another seat, I'll take a ride. Eric Thomas, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you. And to our viewers in the United States and elsewhere around the world, and those here on campus, thank you for joining us for 10 years hence. It's been our pleasure. I will let you go for dinner tonight, and we'll just catch up when you have time. Best wishes, everyone.